Great question. I love your questions, Devin. Well, I think the biggest myth in my industry is that everyone speaks English. And companies make many investments, but they never get their message translated or adapted for their target audience, believing that everybody speaks English. And that is the biggest barrier that they create for themselves, unfortunately.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Expert. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours? Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast. I'm already slightly nervous I'm going to mess up his name, but we're going to try anyway. Levent Yildizgoren, and that's as good as I'm getting.
yeah, spot on, Devin. It's good to be here.
So Levent, just as a few things we're going to talk about is how to avoid cultural misunderstandings or having good cultural understandings with clients and customers and providers. Also talking a little bit about how to grow your business and not just focus on profits and loss, but how you grow your business more or generally. Also opening up new channels of distribution, expanding your business into different countries, and developing an entrepreneurial mindset within your business. So it should be a great conversation. And with that much as introduction, welcome on the podcast, Levent.
Thank you, David. It's always a pleasure to be speaking with you.
Absolutely. Excited to have you on. So with that much as introduction, so before we dive in, as a reminder to the audience, Levent was on the sister podcast, The Inventive Journey. So if you want to go out and check out his journey on that one, definitely make sure to check out that podcast. But for the audience that hasn't had a chance to catch up with that episode and just is looking for a quick introduction, maybe give the audience a quick 1 or 2 minute introduction to yourself.
I'd love to, Devin. Thank you for the opportunity. Well, as you said, my name is Levent Yildizgoren. I'm the co-founder of TTCV Translate. We work with businesses who would like to grow internationally by making their messages understood by their target audience. How do we do that? We do that by culturally translating their messages into the languages that they are trying to attract customers from, making it culturally adaptable so that their target customers understand what they're saying. One example is if they're trying to sell candy in the UK, we say, look, nobody will understand candy, it's got to be confectionery, for instance. Or if it is the other way around, if a food manufacturer want to sell something confectionery in the States, we'll say, look, you have to call this candy. So even within the English language, there is so many nuances that can easily confuse the target audience, which we don't want because, you're a serial entrepreneur, Devin. You know how hard it is to set up a business, get it going, establish a product, and then all of that can be sort of spoiled because the business is making an unintentional mistake with their target audience. Because at the end of the day, customers buy stuff on emotions, and having a sort of a wrong message can easily disengage their interest from the product or the company.
No, I think that's definitely a great introduction. And I think there's a lot there. Great introduction, not only to yourself, but also to a bit of what we're going to be talking about. So with that, and I think it's a great segue. So one of the things we talked just a little bit about before the podcast, and also what you just hit on, was especially if you're going to, and it can be within the same country. I mean, take the United States as an example. You've got a lot of different cultures, everything from Texas to New York to California to the the Midwest to the all or the South and everything else, and you have your own culture. Now, even more so when you go outside of the country that you're used to, there, even if you speak the same language, you have cultural cultural differences. And if you don't speak the same language, you even have more cultural differences.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things we talked a little bit about was how you go about avoiding cultural misunderstandings when you're working with whether it's customers or clients or providers and those type of things. So, as people are looking to expand their area to different cultures or to different locations, how do you go about avoid or understanding the culture so you avoid those misunderstandings?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, and I'd love to be asked this type of questions, because I'm talking to a potential client the other day, and I asked them, why do you want to grow internationally? What is the main motivation? And he said, well, we have an established product. We are producing it. We can double the production without causing any grief to us financially or production-wise. We have a loyal customer base in the UK. So we have no reason not to sell it in other countries. In fact, he said, it's a shame that we haven't done this 5 years ago. I said, great. That's a great answer. That's the answer I was looking for. Because expanding internationally because company is desperate to grow the business could be a kind of little dangerous way to look at this. So he was looking at this all with all the right reasons. Now, what is important there is to smooth the way, and this is where we come in. We want to make sure that their message is understood clearly by the target audience, because it is so easy to make unintentional mistakes. Even, if you imagine you going to another country, as a tourist, and you kind of in your home country, you're kind of used to a certain way to be greeted, but other cultures may have different greetings. Like Americans, if you send me an email, you say, "Hey, Levent," right? And but if I receive an email from my Korean customer or Korean external partner, they'll never start an email, "Hey, Levent." They'll say, "Dear Levent, how are you? How is your family? How is life?" So this is a cultural nuances that I need to be aware of. So if I'm writing an email to my South Korean partner or client, I won't start, "Hey, John," I'll start with the same style that they are kind of expecting. And when I receive an email from you, Devin says, "Hey, Levent," well, that's perfectly normal. Now, how would you know all these nuances? Because there's so many cultures, so many languages. It is quite difficult to be aware of all this. But my biggest tip, and there's something that I learned over the years, is that being able to have a kind of having an open mind is so important. When you have an open mind, it reflects on your body language, tone of voice. So even if you make a mistake, it comes across not offending, because the other party will realize that actually that's an unintentional mistake. How can they interpret it that way? They can interpret it from the body language, tone of voice. And also, there are a lot of signs, especially if the person is lucky enough to be in the same room with them. By reading the room, the body language, how is everyone else speaking, how is everyone else behaving, then it is possible to get the feel of the culture and kind of mirror that behavior. Often works and makes life so much easier.
No, I think that definitely makes sense. And so now one maybe kind of follow-up question to that is, there's a lot of different cultures that are out there, and each culture kind of has, and some things it's more to do, I would assume, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but some is body language, some is, how they talk, some is, cultural things. You don't do X, Y, or Z for behavioral things. And so,
yeah.
Each culture has different things that are more important or more nuanced than others. So some things, you'll say one thing that's greatly offensive, in another culture, it's not what you say, but it's how you act, or whether or not you bow or take off your shoes, or I'm making them up. But, as you're going through and doing that, how do you go about identifying what are the cultural things you should, and how do you go about, what if you make a mistake, how do you go about making it up? In other words, there are things that you should be aware of, and you try and be as culturally sensitive as you can. My guess is you'll never fully be as culturally sensitive as you can. You'll never, you work with a culture long enough, you're going to make mistakes anyway. So how do you go about fixing or addressing those when you've now made those mistakes?
Right. The easiest thing, Devin, is try to avoid them in the first place. Now, that's understandable that it may not be always possible. But my suggestion would be, when a business executive travels to another country, or it could be online, that face-to-face is always easier because people can read the body language, they can make an eye contact. So the sincerity comes a lot more visible when it is face-to-face. But it's a fact of life that the meetings nowadays are online as well. So my advice is really, when a business executive invests time and money on developing a relationship, then they really need to pay attention to at least the main cultural, what's the red lines. So not to cross those lines is so important. And why? Because they have already invested time, they've already invested resources. Because, going back to the potential client I was speaking with the other day, now the moment they think that they want to go international, there's a series of actions that they will take. It could be 3 months, it could be 6 months. Some companies, it could be 12 months. And during that time, they'll talk about it with their leadership teams. They'll talk to consultants such as myself. They'll consult other people, distributors. So when you think about the time they invest in developing the idea, is hours and hours. So one of these items should be check culturally important points. So is it religion? Is it football? Is it humor? Because, humor, it's Anglican conversations. Humor is a great place, but it's not in every culture. So assuming that what works in one country will work everywhere is probably the biggest mistake. So investing a little bit of time, because they've already invested time with consultants, time with their leadership, time with distributors. So a little bit of time to find out those cultural important points, so that, if it is religion, then avoid the subject. It could be football. Football is, some countries are so passionate about football. I should know. As you may know, I'm originally from Turkey, and I've seen good friends fall apart because of football. So being aware of this, what is the country passionate about? Because it's also important for marketing purposes. Understanding what the target audience is passionate about, what is it that they like, what's it that they don't like, is also very important. So having spent those times and you still make a mistake, I think the sincerity will come across. The body language, the eye contact, and being, showing humility is so important as well, because people understand. I'll give you one example. My son-in-law, he's learning Turkish, and when he speaks, he makes mistakes. Guess what? People love it. people love him even more because of his mistakes, because it shows that he's making himself vulnerable by not being afraid of making those mistakes. So, there's actually, with the right mindset, there's a lot of tolerance that you will be offered by the other parties in the right environment, right body language, right eye contact.
No, and I think that the one you hit on is probably the most. And I lived in Taiwan, which is Chinese culture, for a couple of years, and picked up the language and was doing that. And I think one of the things that they found is, hey, if you're making an effort and trying to understand their culture, trying to be sensitive, trying to convey it, even if you're messing it up or you're not doing it perfectly, there's a lot more understanding and willingness to overlook things that otherwise might be insensitive, because hey, they know you're trying, and they get that there's that that attempt to be cultural sensitive. Versus I think that the opposite attitude is if you think you know everything, or you're not being very kind or culture, you're not trying to be sensitive, and it comes across as being arrogant, then it has that opposite effect of now they're saying, hey, they don't even attempt to care about our culture. So I think that is a great takeaway. Well, maybe shifting gears just a little bit to a couple of the other areas that we talked on. And I think that one of the other ones that I thought that we talked a bit before the podcast, which is another great area for people to consider, was that when you're growing your business, you shouldn't just focus on profits and loss. Now, not to say you shouldn't at all not focus on profits and loss, because if your business doesn't make profit or doesn't make money, you're not going to be in business for very long, because eventually, maybe you're the Amazon or the Netflix that loses millions of dollars, but for the 99% of businesses, you have to make money to stay in business. And so as you're doing that, kind of what is your thoughts as to, as you're growing your business, not just focusing on the profit loss, what other things should people be focusing on or considering?
Well, great question, Devin. I'm still working on it for myself, so I can share my thoughts on this, but it is still work in progress for me. And yes, as like you said, profit and loss, controlling the cost is very important, because how hard it is to earn cash. So we need to make sure that we spend it wisely. But like you said, if we spend more of our time trying to control the cost, then chances are we may be missing opportunities. So, and most business executives want to control the cost. And I know from myself, if I focus too much on the P&L, I then realize that I'm actually deviating from the opportunities. Opportunities becomes like a risk. So focusing on P&L too much can create a risk awareness, not risk awareness, risk aversion, and which is okay. We need to averse risk. Of course, it's important, but without taking a risk, I mean, when you start a business, do you not take a risk? You have to take a risk. One thing about the entrepreneurial life is that nobody gives you any guarantees other than your gut feeling, So, okay, we have to take risks. We kind of accept that. So why focus too much on P&L? Whereas there are opportunities that by some investing time, money, we can create a lot more revenue and growth for our businesses. And international expansion is one of the great ways to do that, because business has established, provided that business has an established product, established customer base, and of course financially stable, then taking it to another country is just adding a distribution channel that will help them to grow so much more. And it is proven by many international surveys that companies involved in international trade are more innovative, and actually, if I'm not mistaken, 4 times more likely to survive, because they have access to extra customers, but not just customers, also providers. And as you're involved in other countries, you learn stuff. How many times that I have traveled internationally and came back with so many knowledge. And businesses benefit from this as well. So it brings extra revenues, it brings innovation, and it increases the chance of survival of the business should things go little difficult in the domestic market.
No, and I think I like how you hit on, because I mean, I think there is a balance, and I think it's a hard balance to find, because at the one sense, you know, if you don't, if all you do is focus on trying to expand the business to the point that you rob all of your profits and you never have any money that you're socking away, or that you're saving, or that or have a rainy day fund, so to speak, that's also dangerous for the business, because if it's first time you hit a hiccup, or any of your ventures or things that you're trying out don't work out, your business goes under. And so you can't do that. And yet by the same token, if you're so risk averse now that you never take any chances, and or as soon as you make money, all you do is put it in savings, you're not going to grow, you're not going to expand, you're not going to take care or opportunities as they come your way, and your competitors will. So I think there's always that balance, and you have to find where you can't be so risk averse that you don't do anything, and you can't be so reckless that you try everything, and finding that balance. But I think you do have to say it's not all about profit and loss. That's only a portion of it, and you also need to take advantage of opportunities as they come along. Now, maybe just along those lines is you know, one of the questions that comes up, and what you've hit on is, you know, you can look for opportunities in different countries, or to expand your business into other areas, whether it's different countries or different locales or geographic locations that will provide opportunities. And as you mentioned, you know, it will help to make your business, you know, increase the likelihood of it surviving. But not all countries are good ones to expand in. In other words, you know, you may go to and say, hey, well, if I go to South Africa, I'm going to be great. Well, you got to understand why it's for South Africa versus Brazil versus Canada versus Mexico versus China versus Russia versus, you know, go down the list of all the countries that are out there. And some of the countries may be great opportunities and some may not. And so how do you go about, as you're looking to expand your business into different countries, how do you identify which ones are the good countries or the ones that were worthwhile to pursue?
Great question, Devin, because once the business executive decides to go international, and then the thing is, they get all excited, and it's totally understandable. And the first thing that comes to mind is, let's take action. While we are motivated, let's take action. And the worst thing that can happen there is to take action bit far too quickly, without making the necessary steps. Now, I've written my book mainly for that reason, because I noticed that successful global brands are following a methodology, and they don't do any shortcuts in that respect. And the companies, I noticed that not making big success of international expansion is the ones that kind of not cutting corners intentionally, but missing certain steps. So I thought, okay, what is their secret? So I come up with this lingo model. Basically, it is a five simple steps for any business to follow, and starting with market research. I call this learn the market. Researching is everything, because I mean, to answer your question, the most logical way is the countries within close proximity is always the best solution, provided that there's a demand for that product. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, USA does more business with Canada and Mexico than any other country. England, UK, United Kingdom does 50% of their exports to European Union. Why? Because it's so easy. You can load a lorry, and then it will be, you know, in few hours, it will be across the channel in France, Holland, Netherlands, Belgium. You know, the close proximity makes everything easier. But is that the only thing that we need to be looking for? So the first step is market research, and it can be done actually on the desktop by simply checking out free tools such as Google Trends, keyword research, understanding what sort of demand is there for that product. And keyword research is a good thing, because by doing the research, anyone can see the volume for that volume of keyword research for their product or service. So that gives an indication. Another one is that we often don't realize, but by using Google Analytics on our website, we can actually see which countries we are getting visitors from and to which pages. Say you have a product and it's your flagship product, and you can notice that you're getting visitors from country A, B, C. But from the other countries, you get like maybe 2% of your traffic, but more traffic coming from the first three countries. Well, that's a kind of a natural, there's clearly an interest from these countries. So it can be investigated further. The second step is, once you shortlist, say, 2-3 countries, because of the initial demand that you kind of establish. And then the second step is really going a bit deeper, analyzing those markets before. And at this stage, we are not making any plans. We are not making any website adjustments. We are not doing any translations. We are still at a research stage, because by this, we first shortlisted 2-3 countries, and then now we're going a bit deeper to see which one is actually best. Because sometimes it can be sensible to expand to all 3 countries. If it is something like European, say Europe, Belgium, France, and Netherlands are so close to each other. So by having a base in one of the countries, you can easily service all 3 countries. So why not? But if there's logistical problems or totally different labeling or packaging requirements, then of course this decision may not be correct. And this is the second stage that actually business can actually establish to expand to all 3 countries or one of them, and then see which one is making sense. And then comes the implementation stage. But the biggest mistake that I come across is companies missing these first 2 steps. So going into a country because somebody says, a distributor, it could be a distributor, with all their intentions, they may be easily misled to go expand into a country. So if they don't do this initial research, it can backfire. But doing a research, desktop research, it can give you a lot of insights about the country that you're considering.
No, it's I think some great piece of advice, and then certainly very interesting. So, well, as we are unfortunately reaching towards the end of the podcast, and there's always many more things that would be fun to talk about than we have time to talk about. But I always have one question that I'd love to ask at the end of each episode. So we'll go ahead and jump to that now. So the question I always ask is, within your industry, what is the biggest myth and why is it wrong?
Great question. I love your questions, Devin. Well, I think the biggest myth in my industry is that everyone speaks English. And companies make many investments, but they never get their message translated or adapted for their target audience, believing that everybody speaks English. And that is the biggest barrier that they create for themselves, unfortunately.
No, and I think that that's a great takeaway, because I think that, there is I don't know, I guess I'll say arrogance. I don't know that it's arrogance that people are doing it intentionally, but there is a conception that everybody speaks English, that, hey, if I speak English, they should learn my language. And I think that you have to, almost going back to our original discussion, is you have to be culturally sensitive to, there's a lot of other languages out there. There's a lot of other cultures, and you can't expect everybody to conform around you. And just because English is a predominant business language in the world doesn't mean that you should have that expectation. So I think that's a great takeaway and a great myth to dispel. Well, as we wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Thanks for asking, David. Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so they can search for me, Levent Yildizgoren, easily foundable on LinkedIn. Also, I have an offer for your listeners. If they visit levent.team, that is TEAM, they can download my book free of charge or purchase it from Amazon. And if they are UK based, we can even post it to them, the paperback version. So this is totally free. And there are also some other goodies as well that they can have access free of charge. So that's exclusive offer for your listeners, David.
Awesome. Well, I definitely appreciate the offer. I think that's a great opportunity for people to take advantage of. And definitely encourage them to reach out. So with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been a fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you can help us to share this expertise so that more entrepreneurs, startups, and small business can find out about great areas of expertise, that would be greatly appreciated. And to do so, just click share, click subscribe, leave us a review to make sure that we can share that all this great expertise. And with that, if you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your startup, your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we are always here to help. Well, thank you again, Levent, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you, Devin. It was a total pleasure speaking with you.